There's been another mass shooting in America.
We may never understand what leads anybody to terrorize their fellow human beings like this. You know, such violence, such evil is senseless.
We've endured too many of these tragedies in the past few years. And each time I learn the news, I react not as a president, but as anybody else would, as a parent. I've had to make statements like this too many times. Communities like this have had to endure tragedies like this too many times. I hope and pray that I don't have to come out again during my tenure as president to offer my condolences to families in these circumstances.
It's President Obama speaking out for the 15th time, 15 mass shootings on his watch. Let's talk about it now on our roundtable, joined by Greta Van Susteren from Fox News, Matt Bai, national political columnist for Yahoo News, and two leading members of Congress, Republican Tom Cole, Democrat Keith Ellison. And Greta, let me begin with you. You saw the president so angry, so frustrated on Thursday. He said this is a political choice that we make to allow this to happen every few months in America.
Well, it isn't, I don't know if it's a political choice, but it's now become a political issue. Look, everyone's on the same page in this. Every single person.
Everyone's on the same page?
No, to the sense every single person wants this to stop, this violence, every single person. And so some call for gun control, and I think that's in some ways unrealistic. When I practiced law in the District of Columbia, very strict gun laws, and every single one of my clients could get a gun. The guns are out there. They are all over. And you can create all the laws you want, but all the guns are out there. They're going to be coming in through black markets and everything else. And so we're not being very realistic that all of a sudden changing the laws is going to change anything. The guns are there. If you really want to regulate, you got to be a little bit smarter. Maybe regulate ammunition so that people can't use their guns. That's the smart thing. But I think we're being a little bit unrealistic about this. And part of the problem is that the politicians on both sides, all due respect, sir, both of you gentlemen, is that they take sides. They're not looking for solutions. Everyone wants to fundraise off this. The anti-gun people want to fundraise, and the pro-gun want to fundraise.
Any change coming out of this?
You know, I hope the change is in the mental health area, quite frankly. My friend Tim Murphy, who's a congressman, has a great piece of legislation.
Mental health professional as well.
Yeah, mental health, doctorate in psychology. But he has a great saying. He said, the problem's not what's in their hand, it's what's in their head. And we have not taken advantage of the billions of dollars we spend.
But how do you answer the question? You know, every single country in the world has crazy people.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. I mean, look, we are leading the world on in these gun deaths, and we're not doing anything about it. And people argue that because we can't stop every gun death, we can't stop any. That's not true. We could do background checks. 90% of Americans believe that we can. We can eliminate these high-capacity magazines that allow them to spray a whole theater or something like that. There's a lot of things that we can do that we need to do. We should let the CDC give us statistics on how bad this gun carnage is.
What are you going to do about the fact that there's so many guns out there, that there's such a huge black market? I'm not getting the laws were so strict against my clients, but they always got guns.
Greta, because they come across the boundary. That's why.
Yeah.
So we've got to have.
But they're still going to.
So we've got to. Nope. We've got to do more than just city by city. This is something where we need a national policy, and we've got to treat it like it is a health issue, a disease, which it is.
You know, Matt, the president did hit on something that there does seem to be almost a ritual that we all participate in after this gun of violence. You know, we see the sides break down, we give it the coverage, we talk about who the shooter was, we focus on the victim, nothing changes.
Nothing changes. Partly because we're having the wrong debate. This is the wrong debate to me. I mean, we're conflating a couple of different issues. Because there's this debate about gun safety, and what do you do with guns, regulating ammunition, gun crime. There's things you can do around that, and the gun lobby's blocked it, and maybe it would have some effect. This is a very specific thing. This is what we saw in Arizona, it's what we saw in Connecticut, it's what we saw this week. It is a clearly mentally ill person who has signaled violence, has access to a lot of weapons, who for some reason gets to keep those weapons, either because the people around them and the people who see it feel powerless to stop it, or just won't do anything about it, or are in some kind of denial. And in this case, right, when we talk about civil liberties, say post 9/11, we've had a very robust debate about civil liberties versus national security. This comes down to an issue of civil liberties. How do you balance the clear mental instability of someone who has access to guns against civil liberty laws that keep you from going in and taking them away? That's the debate we need to have.
You saw the shooter's father lamenting yesterday about how could he possibly have 14 guns in Congress, and you're talking about
but he hasn't seen his son in 10 years. He's not a very attentive
2 years,
father.
I think it was. But if you're going to focus on mental health, what could be done? Should there be forced institutionalization?
There's legislation, in Congress right now, and we should begin in the places where we can agree. Republicans and Democrats don't have to fight about mental health. They can agree on mental health. I would argue picking up Tim Murphy's bill, which would be the first significant federal legislation in this area in decades, and moving that forward in a bipartisan way, that's a real contribution.
I think we should move ahead on mental health, but I think we should move ahead on it with the idea that we're going to solve some of the problem with that, and there's other things that we can do. And throwing up our hands and saying that this is just fate and it's in the hearts of human depravity and it will never be fixed is just a defeatist attitude, and it's wrong.
I think we're underestimating the fact that there's a lot of evil out there. People sort of, oftentimes want to sort of excuse and say it's mental health. There's an awful lot
everywhere.
Well, no, I'm saying this, but I'm saying this.
This is an American problem. We're worse than anybody on this.
I'm not saying that, but I'm saying is that this is also, there's an awful lot of evil. We look at it's glorified in our culture, but you turn on the TV or video games and the big heroes coming in with the shock or with the assault weapons.
They got violent videos in Japanese video games.
Call it evil, call it mental health. When somebody signals they have violent intentions and deep depression and they have 15 guns and access to 15 guns and nobody takes them away and nobody says anything, you have a problem. There ought to be a policy, and yes, there ought to be a federal policy effort to try and fix that problem, because it just keeps happening.
That's the last word for now. We're going to come back in a little bit. Chris Christie here live as well. And the roundtable later is going to take on a tough week for Hillary Clinton and the top candidate for House Speaker, plus Bill O'Reilly on his new bestseller, Killing Reagan.
Everybody thought Hillary Clinton was unbeatable, right? But we put together a Benghazi special committee, a select committee. What are her numbers today? Her numbers are dropping. Why? Because she's untrustable.
Today, here, I am announcing my intention to run for Speaker of the House of Representatives. We were entrusted by the American people with the largest majority the Republicans have ever had since Babe Ruth was swinging the baseball bat. But they didn't send us here to perpetuate the status quo.
Chris Christie not running for Speaker, but there are two candidates right there, Kevin McCarthy and Jason Chaffetz. Let's talk about this on our roundtable right now. Congressman Tom Cole, you're a supporter of Kevin McCarthy. We just saw that comment got so much notice this week where he seemed to be saying that the Benghazi committee was working because it was driving down Hillary Clinton's poll numbers.
Well, it probably wasn't his most artful moment as a speaker, but frankly, I think this is as a tempest in a teapot. I really do. I don't think it's going to change what happens in terms of what people decide. And I just think
Aren't
it's
your
been
colleagues
overblown.
concerned about it, though? Your Republican colleagues?
No, I don't think so. I think some people are using it as an opening to get in the race. That's fine. This is politics. It's hardball sport. But I don't think it's going to change how everybody votes.
Matt Bai, you pointed out this week in your column that in some ways that Kevin McCarthy is running for a different job than speakers used to run for, that the parties in the House have become oppositional.
Yeah, now the wave keeps sweeping in parties opposed to the president, and what you have is, instead of a speaker who is traditionally literally speaking for the House, enacting the will of the House in negotiations with the White House, you have speakers who are essentially at the pinnacle of resistance. There seem to be resistance leaders, and there's a conflict. If you're a guy like John Boehner, or I think Kevin McCarthy, who has some aspiration to govern, you find yourself in a position where your main job is to stop an agenda or roll one back. I think it's almost impossible, as I said in that column, to do the job and to keep it.
And
I think at this point you got to choose.
As another government shutdown could be looming in December.
Oh, yes, because President Obama has said that he does not intend to sign any more short-term spending bills either, which creates a problem for the House as well, although I think that he will if it once put on his desk. But let me just talk about that Kevin McCarthy statement for a second. If you step back for a second, look at Chairman Gowdy, he's a pretty straight arrow.
The Benghazi Committee.
The Benghazi Committee, about which Kevin McCarthy is speaking. Chairman Gowdy is a straight arrow. So far, he has, I think he would disagree with Kevin McCarthy about it being political. He has requested documents, and he's asking questions of people. So I think, while there's criticism of Kevin McCarthy's statement, which was not a good one, I think you got to look at how Chairman Gowdy's conducting the committee so far.
You were shaking
This
your head.
thing is political from the beginning to this moment. $4.5 million we've spent on this thing. Hey, look, let's shut it down. Let's shut it down. We've got to shut it down now. It is improper. And if one member were to use their office to campaign, to try to drive somebody else's numbers down from the congressional office, that would be an ethics violation.
It's not going to get shut down before October 22nd, when Hillary's going to have to go before that.
The American people should demand that it's shut down right now.
But wait a second. You've got to understand is that in order to get to the bottom of it, you have to have all the documents. And the State Department has not provided all the documents.
The documents from a Roos Select Committee from the very beginning? Documents for what?
It's been any such
this
thing.
Is absurd. Yes, it is.
No, it's not. I mean, the reality is it's produced and found important information. We wouldn't know about the server if it wasn't for this. They're continuing, as Greta said, it's been systematically, appropriately and properly run by the chairman.
If Democrats
There's been no
complaints
about this.
There would be outrage that this is a fishing expedition.
Congressman, it's got to be transparency on all these issues.
Right.
And I don't know how the chips are going to fall either way. And Congressman Gowdy, Chairman Gowdy, has the obligation to do it right. I don't know, it may come out exonerating. It may exonerate.
That is not serious.
Matt Bai,
by the admission of the majority leader.
It does give Hillary a talking point when she goes and testifies on October 22nd. And coming after this week, she's going to need something. We saw these incredible crowds for Bernie Sanders again last night. 20,000 people in Boston, Massachusetts, raised almost as much money as she did the last quarter. Does it cause you to revise your view at all on his staying power and what he could do to this race?
Not that much. Look, I've always been, you know, a little more skeptical about her chances than other people. I think it's a tough race. But look, I think if you're Hillary Clinton, and I do think it's a flawed campaign and she's a flawed candidate, every night you go to sleep and Bernie Sanders is the guy who's your main competition, you're having a good day. Because there is a tradition of Democratic frontrunners having very ideological, not necessarily electable, you know, opponents who rile up the base and give them a good run for their money but can't win nationally. And I think Bernie Sanders probably fits into that category. He's not Barack Obama.
Is it a good day if he exposes enough weakness to drive Joe Biden into the race?
Well, no, then it's not. Then it's a very bad day. And that I think if you're the Clinton team, that's got to be your greater concern. You are always going to have a challenge. You are always going to have a base in rebellion at some point. If Bernie Sanders is the instrument for that rebellion, you got to consider yourself a pretty solid shape.
Well, here's what I think of that argument. I think that I like the idea. I like the idea that Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton and O'Malley and Biden are all competing to help out the American worker, the American family. I like that. I mean, they all are. I mean, Bernie is doing good because he's talking about the bread and butter issues that people are feeling every day. Hillary's trying to do the same thing. I mean, look at the other side. They're competing on, do you like Mexicans a lot? You know, should Muslims be the president? All this kind of crazy stuff. I think the competition is a good thing. I think it brings out the best in all of them. I think it's going to actually help Hillary Clinton, and I think it's going to help whoever we end up with.
You know, the thing that Hillary Clinton, though, has a huge weapon come this debate. If she can drive it home to the American people that Senator Bernie Sanders has been talking about this stuff for the last 30 years, but accomplished zero on it. And that's important, that he hasn't accomplished anything, that he's a big talker. I think that's a problem for Senator Bernie Sanders.
You know, speaking to people's reality is doing something, in my opinion. I mean, Bernie Sanders has done a tremendous service to this race by talking to what people feel, no matter who the nominee is.
Has he actually delivered on anything? Secretary Clinton's in a far better position than Bernie Sanders.
I think that's a reasonable thing to argue, but I also think that this is a primary nominee race, and the issue is to put things on the table that are important to people. People will make choices.
You got a similar dynamic over on the Republican side.
Well, I'm heading up Republicans for Bernie Sanders for the Democratic nomination. So I think Matt's exactly right.
But how about if you look at the polls right now on the Republican side, Donald Trump, Carly Fiorina, Ben Carson, 1, 2, and 3. Are any one of those three going to be the nominee?
In my opinion, I honestly don't know. I've never seen it this volatile. But I think this idea that those three merge into one is very unlikely. I think there's a big difference between a Ben Carson supporter and a Donald Trump supporter and a Fiorina supporter. They're very different styles, very different kinds of candidates.
What does it tell you that Donald Trump has held on top for so long?
Well, I think he's tapped into something that's real out there, which is anger at the political establishment, frustration that Washington seems gridlocked, and you know, the guy clearly is a gifted communicator, flamboyant figure. He attracts attention, so he's got a lot of skills. The real question question is, whose second choice is he? Who will move toward him in these other camps? And I think there's an assumption out there that the other outsiders will. I just find that hard to believe. I think they'll move in different directions.
It sure shows how pundits are wrong, because they said that Trump would be out. Boy, I tell you, it's an indictment of pundits who have said that Trump was out.
And he is still on top. We've got to take a break right there.